She called me at 6 in the morning. I was already up. I'm always up before the sun at my age. There's something about crossing 60 that rearranges your relationship with sleep. I had my coffee, I had the kitchen light on, and I was looking out at the backyard where the frost had come in overnight and turned everything silver. When I saw her name on the phone, I didn't answer with hello. I just said, "Where are you?" She said, "Mom," and then she couldn't finish. I already had my coat on by the time she told me she was at O'Hare. I didn't ask how she got there or what she'd packed. I didn't ask about my son-in-law. I knew from the sound of her voice that there were things she couldn't say yet, and I wasn't going to make her say them in a terminal, standing next to a luggage cart, while people walked past her with their rolling suitcases and their normal lives. "Stay where you are," I said. "I'm coming." The drive from Wilmette to O'Hare takes 40 minutes in the morning if you know which way to go. I know which way to go. I've lived outside Chicago for 31 years. I raised my daughter in that house, in that town. 3 blocks from the elementary school and 2 from the library where she used to spend entire Saturdays. She grew up and married a man with a big name and a bigger family. And somewhere along the way, I lost track of how unhappy she had become. That's the part I still haven't forgiven myself for. I found her at the arrivals curb, outside baggage claim, sitting on top of a single suitcase. My grandson was beside her, asleep against her shoulder, 4 years old and completely unbothered by the world. The way only 4-year-olds can be. She had dark circles under her eyes, and she was wearing the same blazer she wore to her anniversary dinner the year before. I recognized it because I had been there. I had sat across from her and her husband at a restaurant in River North and watched them toast each other and thought, "She seems tired," and said nothing. I put her suitcase in the trunk. I buckled my grandson into the car seat I'd had in my back seat for 2 years, ever since he started spending weekends with me. I got in the driver's seat. I turned the heat up, and I waited. She stared out the window for a long time. "She fired me," she finally said. She called me into the conference room on Monday morning, and she fired me. Said the position had been restructured. Said my performance had been inconsistent. She had HR there. There was a folder. She had printed out a folder. I kept my eyes on the road. "I've worked there for 5 years, Mom. 5 years. I built the client relations department from 11 accounts to 43. 43 accounts. That's in the folder too, but she didn't open that page. Her mother-in-law's name was Vivienne. She ran a wealth management and financial advisory firm her late husband had founded in the 90s, one of those old Chicago money operations where the name on the door had been the same for decades, and the clients were mostly inherited along with the building. When my daughter married into that family 8 years ago, Vivienne had offered her a position. At the time, my daughter had taken it as a gesture of welcome. It wasn't. I understood that now in a way I hadn't then. "What does your husband say?" She turned and looked at me. Her eyes were dry, which was almost worse than if she'd been crying. "He said I should give her some time. He said it would blow over. He said she does this sometimes." "Does this," I repeated. His words. I nodded once and said nothing else. She told me the rest slowly, over the following hour, while my grandson slept in the back and the highway opened up ahead of us. They had been living in the family home in Kenilworth, in a separate wing that Vivienne had offered them when they got married. My daughter had been grateful for that too, at the time. She had been grateful for a lot of things that I now understood had been designed to make her feel indebted, to make her feel that everything she had was something she'd been given rather than something she'd earned. Vivian had suggested 6 months ago that it might be better if my grandson started spending more time with her. She had a nanny. She had a routine. My daughter was busy with work. Vivian's word. And children needed stability. My daughter had agreed to some of it, the way you agree to things in that family, which is to say she had been worn down over weeks of small conversations until she couldn't remember what she had originally wanted. On Sunday night, Vivienne had told her son that there were concerns. On Monday morning, the folder was printed. My daughter had her son, one suitcase, and the clothes she was wearing. She said I could come back for the rest, my daughter said, when I was ready to have a conversation. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. The house looked the same as it always did. The porch light was on. The rose bushes I planted 20 years ago were cut back for winter. Just the bare canes in the frozen ground. You won't need to go back for anything, I said. She looked at me. Mom, I have furniture. I know. I put my hand over hers. I mean, you won't need her permission to have a conversation. When it happens, it'll happen on your schedule, not hers. I had said that with more certainty than I had any right to feel at that moment. But I had learned a long time ago that the most important thing you can do for a daughter who has had her legs cut out from under her is make her believe, even briefly, that the ground is still there. The ground was still there. I had made sure of that, though she didn't know it yet. Let me tell you about Vivian's firm. Harwick Meridian Advisors was founded in 1991 by Vivian's husband, a man named Douglas, who died of a cardiac event in 2009 and left behind a company worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million in managed assets, a Kenilworth house, a summer place in Door County, and his son, who had been raised to believe that wealth was a birthright rather than a result. What Douglas had not left behind was a clean title to the building his firm operated from. The building was on North Wabash, a narrow 4-story walk-up that Harwick Meridian had occupied since 1994. In 2003, Douglas had approached a private investor consortium about refinancing the building to fund an expansion. The consortium included several parties. I was one of them. I am not a wealthy woman, in the way Vivienne is wealthy. I'm a retired CPA who worked for 30 years, spent carefully, invested quietly, and made a few decisions over the decades that turned out to be good ones. One of those decisions was the Wabash building. My share of the consortium was 17%. Not controlling, not dramatic, just 17% of a note that Douglas signed and that, when he died, passed into an estate arrangement that Vivian had apparently never fully reviewed. I knew this because I had reviewed it. After my daughter came home on that January morning, I went to my filing cabinet, the actual physical one, in my home office, where I have kept physical copies of every financial document I have ever signed, and I pulled out the folder. Not Vivienne's folder. Mine. I had been part of that consortium for 20 years. The note had been extended twice, both times by agreement of all parties. My shares had never been bought out. Vivienne had continued to make payments to the consortium account, and I had continued to receive my quarterly distributions. And I do not believe she had ever once looked at the list of names on the other end of that agreement. People with old money often make that mistake. They assume everyone around them is background. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name is Gloria, and she has been my attorney since 1998. And she is the kind of woman who does not use unnecessary words. I explained the situation. There was a pause. "You're a lien holder," she said. I'm a lien holder on the building where her firm operates. On the building where her firm operates. Another pause. Does she know? She does not. I heard Gloria put down whatever she had been holding. Tell me what you want the outcome to be, she said. I told her. Here is what I did not do. I did not call Vivienne. I did not call my son-in-law. I did not send a letter or make a threat or do any of the things that might have felt satisfying in the moment and accomplished nothing in the long run. I had learned something over 63 years of being a woman in the world, which is that satisfaction is not the same as resolution, and that the people who make moves loudly are usually the ones who are running out of options. I waited. My daughter stayed with me through January and into February. She got my grandson enrolled in the pre-K 3 blocks away, the same building where she had gone to kindergarten, which was something neither of us mentioned, because it would have made us both cry. She started sleeping again. She started eating breakfast. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs and she was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, a cup of coffee, and a legal pad, and she was writing something, and I stood in the doorway and did not interrupt her. That afternoon, she told me she'd been making a list of the accounts she'd brought in herself, the ones where the relationship was with her and not with the firm. 43 accounts. About 30 of them she believed would follow her if she went independent. I'd need liability insurance, she said, and a registered investment advisor designation, which I technically already have, and an office. You have an office, I said. The third bedroom, Mom. It's a real desk. It has a door. Use it until you can afford to stop. She looked at me for a moment. You knew I was going to land here, didn't you? You saw this coming. I did not answer that question directly because the full answer was complicated. I had not predicted the Monday morning folder, but I had watched my daughter spend 5 years in a job that was also a leash, in a house that was also a trap, married to a man who had been taught to manage conflict by waiting for it to go away. I had watched and said nothing because she was an adult, and it was her life, and I had made a promise to myself when she turned 18 that I would not be a mother who inserted herself. I had kept that promise a little too well. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. In the middle of February, Gloria called me. The consortium had a clause, not unusual in these arrangements, that allowed any single party to request a formal review of the terms if the underlying property had a change in operational use or ownership structure. When Douglas died, there should have been a notification to all parties. There had not been. That was a technical breach, minor on its own, but it opened a door. It also meant that the extended terms of the note, the reduced interest rate that had been negotiated during the 2018 extension, were potentially voidable. Not certainly, potentially. The difference between those two words in a negotiation is enormous. Gloria sent a letter. It went to Vivienne's corporate attorney, not to Vivienne herself. The letter did not mention me by name. It referenced the consortium, the breach of notification, and requested a meeting to discuss the terms of continued operation. I was told Vivienne's attorney called back within 4 hours. I did not hear from my son-in-law during any of this. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. He knew my daughter had left. He knew she was with me. He had sent 2 text messages in January, one asking if she was okay, one saying he hoped she knew the door was open, and then nothing. He was waiting for the storm to pass. He had been raised to wait for storms to pass. What he had not been raised to understand is that some storms are not weather. Some storms are the first clear day after a long time of lying to yourself about what the sky actually looks like. In March, we had a meeting. Gloria and I, Vivienne's attorney, and a representative from the rest of the consortium, a retired physician from Evanston, who had been as surprised as anyone to receive Gloria's letter, and who had, after 3 phone calls, agreed to coordinate with us. We met at Gloria's office on Michigan Avenue in a conference room on the 14th floor where you can see the lake on a clear day. Vivienne was not there. That was her choice, and it told me something. The meeting lasted 2 hours. I sat at the table and did not raise my voice once. Gloria raised hers twice, both times for good reason. By the end of it, the operative terms were these. The consortium retained the right to a formal buyout review, which would require Harwick Meridian to either refinance the note under current market rates that had risen considerably since 2018, or negotiate a modified equity arrangement with the consortium parties. The difference in annual payment under current market rates was not nothing. It was the kind of number that makes a closely held family firm have a very uncomfortable board meeting. I walked out of Gloria's building and stood on Michigan Avenue in the March cold, with the wind off the lake doing what it always does to everyone who stands in it, which is remind you that it does not care about your plans. And I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not victory, not satisfaction, something quieter. I had not done this to win. I want to be honest about that. I had not spent 20 years as a lien holder on that building because I was waiting for this moment. I had done it because it was a reasonable investment in 2003, and it had remained one. The sequence of events that turned it into leverage was not my design. It was just the shape of the truth after everything else was stripped away. I went home and I made dinner. 2 weeks later, my son-in-law called me directly. I had been wondering when he would. He was polite because he was always polite. That was one of the things about him that had always made me uncomfortable, the way his politeness never seemed to cost him anything. He asked if we could meet. I said yes. We met at a coffee shop in Wilmette. He sat across from me with his coat on for the first 10 minutes, like he was planning to leave quickly if he needed to. I ordered tea. I waited. He started with an apology that was mostly a series of explanations. I let him finish. Then I said, "What are you asking me?" He blinked. "I'm asking if there's a way to resolve this that doesn't what?" He was quiet for a moment. "My mother is under a lot of pressure." "Yes," I said. "She is. I didn't know about the building." "I know you didn't." He looked at his coffee cup. He was 37 years old, and he looked at that moment like a boy who had never been asked to carry anything heavy and had just been handed a very large stone. I did not feel sorry for him exactly, but I did not enjoy the sight of him either. "Your daughter," he finally said, "is the most capable person I've ever known." I should have said that more. I should have said it to her, and I should have said it to my mother a long time ago. It was the first thing he'd said that sounded like it cost him something. I picked up my tea. "Say it to her," I said, "not to me. What you say to me doesn't matter. What you do next matters." I don't know what he said to his mother after that meeting. I know that 2 weeks later, Vivian's attorneys came back to Gloria with a counteroffer that included a buyout of my consortium share at current valuation and a restructured note for the remaining parties. The number they offered me was fair. I had Gloria run it twice to confirm. I accepted. What I did with the money is my business. What I will say is that a portion of it went into a separate LLC that my daughter doesn't know about yet. A small fund I set up in both our names for the day when she needs to sign a lease on a real office and not a third bedroom. The rest I left where it's always been, in the filing cabinet, in the ground. My daughter's firm now has 17 clients. She started in March with the third bedroom and a headset and a contact list. By June, she had her own lease, a small suite in a building in Evanston, shared with 2 other independent advisors. She has kept every plant I gave her when she moved in, which I know because I have been there twice, and the plants are alive, and the desk is covered in paper, and the window looks out over the street where people walk past with their dogs in the morning. She does not know the full story of the consortium, or the note or the meeting on Michigan Avenue. I have not told her. I will tell her eventually, probably at Thanksgiving, when the table is full and there is enough warmth in the room to hold a complicated thing without dropping it. My grandson started kindergarten in September. Same school, same building, same long hallway with the painted tiles. I dropped him off on the first day and stood at the door long enough to watch him walk in without looking back. 4 years old does that. They walk through doors without hesitating. I thought about my daughter at that age, walking through a door without looking back, and I thought about all the doors she'd walked through since, some of which had turned out to be smaller on the inside than they looked from the outside. I thought about the building on North Wabash, 4 stories of old brick and narrow windows, holding up everything Vivienne had built her identity on. I thought about how long I had been, quietly, part of its foundation. My son-in-law called again in August, on my daughter's birthday. He asked if it would be all right if he came by. She said she'd think about it. She called me after and said, "He wants to come by." "What do you think?" I said. "What do you want?" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet. I think I need more time." "Then take it," I said. "There's no clock on this. That's the thing Vivienne never understood about me. She saw a woman in her 60s who had worked a regular job and kept herself small. She saw a name on a distribution list. She saw the mother of an employee and nothing else. She did not see that I had spent 30 years watching, saving, asking careful questions, and putting the answers in a filing cabinet. She did not see that I had learned early that the people who want you to feel like a guest in their world are almost always more afraid of you than you know. She did not see any of that. That, I have come to believe, was her single most costly mistake. Not the folder, not the firing, not the years of slow, careful erasure she had performed on my daughter, like a woman rearranging furniture in a room she had decided was hers. Just that. Underestimating me. I told my daughter once when she was in high school and convinced that she had no power in a particular situation, that power doesn't always look like a room full of people listening to you. Sometimes it looks like knowing something nobody knows you know. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like a filing cabinet in the house in Wilmette that hasn't moved in 20 years. She rolled her eyes at the time. She didn't roll her eyes in March. I keep the consortium folder in the third drawer, behind the tax records from 2019 and in front of the insurance files. It's an ordinary manila folder with a label I typed in 2003 on an actual typewriter, because that is how we labeled things in 2003. I don't look at it often. I don't need to. I know it's there. That has always been enough. I've thought a lot about what made Vivienne so certain she had won. It wasn't cruelty, exactly. I don't think she woke up on that Monday morning wanting to destroy my daughter. I think she woke up and did what she had always done. She made a calculation. She looked at the people around her and assigned each of them a value, and she decided my daughter's value had dropped below whatever threshold she kept in her head. And so she printed the folder and called HR and did what people do when they've confused authority with wisdom for so long they can no longer tell the difference. That's the thing about Vivian. She was intelligent. That's not nothing. You don't build a firm like that on luck alone, but intelligence without honesty is just a faster way to fool yourself. And she had been fooling herself for a long time about what she had actually built and who had been quietly holding part of it up. My daughter spent years trying to earn a place at that table. Years of arriving early and staying late and bringing in accounts and building something real inside a company that treated her contribution like furniture, useful, anonymous, replaceable. She did all of that not because she was naive, but because she had decided to try. I respect that about her more than I've ever said out loud. Trying, when you know the odds are tilted against you, is not weakness. It takes a particular kind of resolve to keep shelling up to a room that would prefer you smaller. What broke her wasn't the firing. She told me that in February, when she could finally talk about it without going quiet in the middle. What broke her was her husband standing still while it happened. That was the actual loss, not the job, not the wing of the house, not the 43 accounts. It was realizing that the person she had built her daily life around had chosen comfort over her, repeatedly for years, in ways she had talked herself out of naming. I don't have a clean lesson to hand you from all of this. I'm 63 years old, and I've learned to be suspicious of clean lessons. What I have is this. The people who underestimate you are counting on you to underestimate yourself too. That's how it works. The dismissal only lands if you absorb it. I didn't absorb it, not because I'm exceptional, but because I had 20 years of paperwork that said otherwise. My daughter didn't absorb it either. Not in the end. She sat at my kitchen table in January with nothing but one suitcase and a 4-year-old and a list in her head of 30 accounts that might follow her, and she chose to count what she still had instead of what had been taken. That is not a small thing. That is, I would argue, the whole thing. The consequences for Vivian were real, and they came from her own decisions, not from anything I engineered with malice, but from 20 years of her treating paperwork like scenery. Actions accumulate. Choices compound. The morning she printed that folder, she was not just firing my daughter. She was standing on ground she had never fully paid attention to. She noticed eventually. My daughter is in Evanston now, with her plants and her desk and 17 clients who chose her. My grandson walks into kindergarten without looking back, and I have a filing cabinet in the 3rd drawer that I don't need to open anymore. I already know what's in it.